Hi everyone, welcome to our session. My name is Daniela Lehmann. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of International IT at the German Foreign Ministry. I'm here with my colleague Hans-Christian Mangelsdorf, who is our Chief Data Scientist, and we will talk a little bit about what we are doing to innovate our IT and AI infrastructure at the Foreign Ministry in Germany. We will also be happy to take questions from you after our presentations. And we have a few slides prepared, which we will start with. I will talk a little bit about our cloud strategy. Cloud technology, of course, is the big development of the last few years in IT, and also it concerns what we do in the Foreign Ministry. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, Germany has one of the largest networks of foreign missions worldwide. So we have 228 altogether foreign missions that comprises 154 embassies and 53 consulates and general consulates, and 12 multilateral representations, such as at the EU or the UN in New York. And what that means is that we have challenges to connect those roughly 230 foreign missions and make sure that everybody has access to our technology systems, to the data that we need to share, that our diplomats worldwide need to work with. So we're using our cloud technology and our cloud strategy to lay the foundation for digitalization and a new frame for more flexible and also more resilient organization. Technical or IT resilience, of course, is more important than ever. We heard the Prime Minister speak about what has changed over the last few years and what we need to do to become more resilient and to innovate more. So with 230 missions worldwide, the challenges, or some of the challenges that we face, are of course latency. So if everybody is connected solely to headquarters in Germany, the cables are just very, very long, or even using satellite technology. The latency for some of the systems that our diplomats need to use is very long. So that is one of the biggest challenges. The dependency on software providers, on large software providers in all layers of the software stack that we use is another one. And also the requirements regarding data protection, GDPR, things like that. And of course, the classified data that we need to protect, especially from cyber threats of all kinds, is a bigger issue the more dependencies you have worldwide, or the more locations you have worldwide, of course. So what we try to do is we try to decentralize our cloud infrastructure to reduce the latency that our missions face. We use a highly standardized infrastructure using containerization so that we can easily adapt and respond to needs or requirements that arise anew by using the same standard stacks. And also, where possible, we use alternative software options, including open source software, where Hans-Christian will also talk about one example a little bit later. And we use international hyperscalers for non-classified data where possible, or at least we're looking into doing that. So you can see here on this graphic, this is the, let's say, original setup of a worldwide missions with our headquarters in the very center. So, and of course, the farther away, just physically, the farther away the missions were, the higher the latency, the harder it was to work with our IT systems and to use the means of digitalization to the advantage of our diplomats. So that's why we're, especially to reduce latency, we have built several regional data centers so that the data traffic just is focused on the locations where it's needed and not has to travel all the way back to headquarters all the time. There are, of course, some requirements that we still have to run solely from headquarters, but we try to make it easier for our diplomats to use technology by localizing data centers around the world. So that, of course, makes the infrastructure as a whole more resilient, because if something happens to one of the regional centers, the others can take over their responsibilities, of course with more latency, but still we have backup options and more redundancy worldwide. It leads to a better experience especially in the offices around the world that are farther away from, let's say, from headquarters, but also from the regional data centers, because overall the distance is shorter. The disadvantage, of course, is that the security becomes more difficult, or let's say there's more things that we need to consider to protect the regional data centers and also the infrastructure around the world from cyber threats and also from physical threats, of course. Our second building block there is using a highly standardized infrastructure through containerization. So that is a basic feature of cloud technology, of course, that we start building new systems that we use or start switching old systems to our own private cloud infrastructure using standardized means so that it is easier to move more systems to that technology and also to scale up and down as necessary. This also increases the resilience and compatibility with every platform that we put on that system, and also makes for easier maintenance because there are not so many different technology options, technology stacks that the IT technicians need to know in order to run our worldwide systems. The disadvantages, of course, at first, establishing that infrastructure costs money. So there's an investment that it needs to happen that, if we just continued the old way, that money would still be necessary over the years, but now we have a kind of upfront investment. But in the end, the costs for that should also come down. And also, if we use the same software stacks, it's possible that those, if they get exploited by outside threats, then the systems are in a way more vulnerable, but of course the options to protect that also increase with the use of certain technology that we employ here. The third building block, as I said, is we use alternative software options where possible, preferably open source software options, so that we reduce the dependency on major software vendors. And we also lower the risk of a vendor lock-in. The license models are changing of the largest software providers, and this is a way for us to insulate ourselves a little bit, at least from that, so that we're less dependent on just having to do whatever the big software providers want us to do and want us to pay for. And also we have a chance with that to manage our own security or IT security better. Disadvantages here also, of course, it's possible that we develop a solution that is just too different in the future and it will be harder to maintain. We need to be sure that the interoperability and fidelity issues are addressed, so there's more work that needs to go into that. And also, there's a different user experience normally to open source products from what most users are used to and may not respond completely or need a longer time to get used to it, let's say that. So to summarize, the biggest building blocks that we have in order to employ our cloud strategy to the advantage of the Foreign Office is that we balance between centralized and decentralized infrastructure, use more localized data centers and infrastructure where feasible, use a high degree of standardization so that the systems overall get easier to maintain, and also try to reduce our vendor dependencies by using open source alternatives. Over to you, Hans-Christian.
Thank you, Daniela. Then maybe if I may just ask you for a short sign of hand before I take over. Are there any programmers, data scientists, data engineers in the room? Okay, excellent. Who considers herself or himself more as a politician, policymaker? Okay, I saw at least one hand, that's good. So we have a good mixture here, although we are a small group. So I think we definitely encourage you to come up with a few questions towards the end, and please don't be shy once we are through with the presentations. So let's start with the presentations right away. Daniela already made a short introduction. My name is Hans-Christian Mangelsdorf. I'm the Chief Data Scientist of the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Daniela just highlighted some challenges, but also the solutions we are developing or already implementing when it comes to making our system more resilient. Now, we have a system that is operating worldwide with a gentle 10,000 people, more or less 10,000 people working abroad for the German Federal Foreign Office. So that makes for a good bunch of people. Now, if you elevate that a little bit, and if you're just talking about public administration at the federal level, in Germany you are talking about roughly 100,000 people, and that excludes the military. So that's about the size of the challenge. Now imagine you are a chief technical officer or even a chief information officer, and you want to make sure that you remain or become both resilient, high-performing, stable, cost-efficient, etc., etc. Any good suggestions, policymakers? I see you smiling, because the challenge is really there. I mean, to make that happen, that's not an easy thing. Now, looking at cloud technology certainly is one of the things that makes a lot of sense, but we have seen some other trends in Germany as well. And one of those things is, and I'm just going to switch to the next slide, is really a much more intense, heightened sense of data and AI that has been publicly announced 3-4 years ago. Actually, the first ever AI strategy at federal level is even older, but as a starting point, 2022, we, as federal government, we issued our first ever data strategy. And why was that? Because we thought, okay, let's not just focus on the traditional stuff, so the office communication, the Word files, the Excel spreadsheets, etc., but take that a bit further and allow public servants to harness the full potential of data and AI that is around the corner and has been around for quite some time. So on that journey, the federal government decided that each and every ministry should at least have 5 to 15 colleagues that are experts in data engineering or data science. And that's precisely what happened then in 2022-23, where each and every ministry basically established a data and AI lab, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And their core message or their core task was really to make available what is out there in terms of data and AI. To think about dashboarding, simulation, chatbots, etc., because we had the feeling as a government that this was still lacking. So I'm just jumping a bit this is some typical voices that probably sound familiar to you, be that an academic institution or be that a government or whatever. So some voices from the floor or from your staff basically asking things like, well, we're using Excel, nice, super nice, it works, but what about a database? Is that probably a bit more future-oriented, sustainable in a way? What about machine translation? What about a chatbot? Why can I use things like ChatGPT on the internet, but why is it impossible for me to use that on my own official computer? That doesn't make sense, right? So, just jumping back here again, that is a bit that's a bit the rationale behind creating this set of, or this additional structure, those data and AI labs across government. And you see here some progress that we've made over the last year in our data and AI landscape. So basically, every ministry having a lab, every ministry either having a data strategy, so taking a much closer look at data governance as well, the way we should, as public administration, actually handle our data, sensitive data, open data, etc., etc. But then increasingly also looking at artificial intelligence, and we as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we developed and implemented our first ever AI charter early 2024. So we consider us being well on track to set the regulatory framework right. Besides, obviously, having the right people that can together with our experts on networks, clouds, etc., produce solutions that are rather rapid prototyping things. Okay, now that's good. So you have the regulation, you have the strategies, you have the people, which is good. So nowadays, you could easily pull together 150 data scientists or data engineers across the federal government and simply lock them up in a room like this and give them a task. I mean, come up with a chatbot in 24 hours and it would probably turn out to be quite a successful thing, I guess, because those colleagues that entered service are coming directly from academia. I see academias in the room over there, if I'm not mistaken, coming from companies, etc., or from research institutions. But what about essential infrastructure? And Daniela rightly mentioned that you always have to square the balance between something that is super sophisticated, that is super specialized, and something that is actually cost efficient, something that you can maintain in the end, and that's not going to ruin you in terms of funding. So again, we as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because we are one of the IT service provider at government level, at federal government level, came up with a project that we simply call PLANE, Platform Analysis and Information System, because we wanted to make sure that those new colleagues that are coming on board in various ministries are actually having the tools to simply do things. I mean, there are data scientists in the room, at least one. I saw one side. So what do you expect? You expect an IDE where you can do your R, Python, JavaScript things. You want to deploy things across your organization or even across government. So you want to make sure that your colleagues that are working at Ministry of XYZ, could be economics, could be justice, could be interior, can consume the things that you are actually doing. Or you can at least collaborate with them based on code or on data, etc., etc. So that's what we have been pursuing since about 2022. We went live in summer 2023 with our first version of what we call PLANE, this platform, which is today a private cloud, a sovereign private cloud, to do exactly that, to allow colleagues to focus on specific problems and not asking the question, do we actually have the tools to do these things later on? I personally consider it as a major step that we nowadays have the tools that are available, so really we can focus on solving everyday problems. It could be anything from a dashboard to a chatbot, and do that in a collaborative way. So not just in one ministry, but across ministry. And this is actually the first time ever that we have achieved this. Now, I'm just jumping a little bit here, because if I'm just taking you back to the typical data and AI lab you have in a German ministry, it would have these standard tasks. So data governance, data management, including data procurement. I mean, getting hold of useful data, be that internal or external, taking a look at, and this is probably the most important part, at rapid prototyping. So imagine, I'm seeing, I guess there are colleagues here who are diplomats here in the room. So imagine a diplomat looking at strange things like foreign trade and simply being in need of a nice dashboard or some sort of analysis of foreign trade data, or looking at diplomatic correspondences, just trying to understand what is in there within this terabyte of data that you're maybe finding in a dump on your local hard disk. So that's feasible nowadays. And again, I'm jumping a bit, sorry for that, but things that we started to do and have been partly up and running are things like I put here on the slide, things like having basic geographical information with a worldwide coverage available. So as of today, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have a dedicated team of geo experts that could basically map any conflict or any situation across the globe and would have the means to make available the data and their products across the house and even across government. You could go on deploying or developing chatbots using open source models or even commercial models is fairly easy nowadays, and it's actually quite straightforward to make that available today across public administration, so that colleagues can actually use it without running the risk of losing data somewhere or spreading their data that might be sensitive somewhere in the internet using things that are not run in a sovereign way. And I could go on different types of dashboards, etc., etc. So the whole spectrum, the whole the whole range of things that you would typically expect when talking about data engineering and data science becomes feasible. Now, I'm just coming towards the end, and I wanted to take you on that journey once more, which is a journey that is basically based on cloud technology. Daniela, you mentioned that we are in a major shift towards cloud technology. Containerization is a significant aspect of what we will be doing and are doing, and will be doing, because it allows to use solutions that have been created elsewhere, or to, well, sometimes they call it lift and shift. It's not that easy. Yeah. It's not that easy to lift and shift things, but still it's feasible. If you have a properly designed software application, you simply take it from one cloud to the other. Obviously, it needs a bit of fine-tuning here and there. So besides offering a sovereign tool stack in a cloud, in a private cloud environment that is provided by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to other ministries at federal level, and opening the door for making solutions that could be coming from, again, academia, private companies, research teams, etc., available. I mean, it's basically like this door over there. I mean, it used to be a very small door and you had to sneak through. Nowadays, the door is wide open because you could simply tell colleagues, okay, here's a group of university students, sit down, here's a seminar, 3-4 weeks, do something nice, focusing on XYZ. And it would be feasible to implement that. We consider that as a major step to really empower public servants to better fulfill their daily routines, to deliver a better service for citizens, especially at the federal level, but also for making use of those funds that are basically coming from taxes in a much more efficient and effective way. So that's a few thoughts on how cloud sovereignty, data engineering, and data science can actually converge to create something where we as a government not only react to things, but can really be a bit further ahead than we probably used to be in the past, focusing on state-of-the-art technologies that in the end should make life a little bit easier for us. Thank you very much. And Daniela, over to you.
Yes, I'll take the clicker. Yes, we will be happy to take your questions. If you have any questions to what we spoke about or generally about how we do IT and data at the Foreign Ministry, then please let us know and we'll be happy to answer.
There's a question over here.
Yeah, there's a microphone coming.
I actually have a practical question, like 2 questions. Okay. Do you consider using hybrid systems as well, like a combination of on-premises and cloud systems for this? And the second question is probably to you mostly. You mentioned the usage of open source software, including large language models. Do you also consider potential threats from the open source models? And if so, then what do you see the most important problem here?
Yeah, I will start with the question about hybrid infrastructure. Yes, we definitely use hybrid infrastructure at the moment. We're starting to move away from the, let's say, legacy on-premise model and towards the cloud-based model. And but there are definitely some of our systems that kind of in that hybrid stage at the moment, in that in-between stage, where we try to are still in the process of ascertaining what the best way forward is. And it's likely that some systems will remain set up in the legacy way, like legacy on-premise. Not everything is going to be moved to the cloud, not where it's, if we agree that it's not feasible, then we won't do that. So for the foreseeable future, there will be a hybrid infrastructure to maintain, definitely, yes.
Yep, maybe I'll just take the question on open source. I mean, to be honest, open source is not the ultimate solution to every problem. I mean, we are probably not the only government or not the only government institution that has tried and tested open source technologies. And I'm not talking about LLMs here, but I'm rather talking about open source in general. And we have made our experience with that, because open source means you need to do a lot of things yourselves, and that costs money and needs quite a number of people to keep the show going on. Now, besides this experience, obviously, and then coming back to your question on LLMs, obviously, I mean, LLMs, open source or off-the-shelf commercial, they all have their strengths and weaks, their risks, their challenges, their opportunities. I mean, we're not really looking at only at one model. I mean, we have a pretty open approach in the sense that we are both testing commercially available models and open source models. And again, and not really opening this discussion about what are the shortfalls of LLMs and biases and training, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm leaving that on the side. But I guess our approach is pretty much a best practice, because everybody is looking at a variety of LLMs. And you see that even when you talk to industry, most industry partners open up their systems, their platforms, their integration systems to quite a number of different models. So the typical IT provider would walk up to you and tell you, okay, I offer you a software suite that you could use, but it's, well, basically you decide what kind of model you take. Here are a few examples, but use Hugging Face, pull your model and plug it in somewhere. And I think that's basically our approach. And again, not talking about the usual typical risk associated to large language models and Gen AI in general. Okay. Oh, I think you were first. So we have a question over there.
Hi, this is Chun from Singapore GovTech. A question on the assets visibility. You mentioned that you're going to use a lot of OSS. What are your thoughts about vulnerabilities like the XZ utilities, backdoor, and things like that? How do you actually maintain asset visibility over many of the components which you use from open source?
Do you want to take or?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, in the end, it's all about controlling your tech stack that you're using. And with this approach, what we typically do, and I'm talking here about Plane as a platform, for instance, is that first of all, we have a clear architecture, a very clear architecture and a roadmap that would not just cover 12 months, but would rather cover 24 to 36 months. We have high visibility about those components that we actually use. And again, here, doing a mixture of open source and commercial tools, always having in mind that at some point in time, you might have to pull out something and plug in something else, and still the system as such should be working properly. So that's really one of the core principles. Then, of course, you have the whole security aspect where you want to make sure that your network, or let's say the environment that you're running your private cloud in, is well protected. I'm not going to elaborate much on that one, but that's definitely something that is like the outer shell that clearly exists. But I guess to answer your question, it's very much about having a clear architectural roadmap and this sense of flexibility, being able to exchange components and parts, that could be hardware and software, without compromising your entire system. Okay, I saw a question over there.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you have like red lines where you won't use any AI at all in your ministry? And my second question is, should diplomats be trained on using AI? Like, how do you do that? Do you do capacity building? How much do you want to invest in it? And where do you do like, okay, this is enough of knowledge, now they have to handle it on their own?
Yeah, should I? Yeah.
I mean, where we don't use AI is anything that has to do with classified information, where we need to, of course, use the highest standards of protection that we can, and where we cannot connect also any external engines or things like that. So that is definitely a red line. But anything that is useful to our diplomats around the world, and that is basically pulled out of available or openly available information, that is where we look at AI and see how much that can make working easier. So
yeah. Maybe to add to what Daniela just said, take an example. I mean, every Ministry of Foreign Affairs is handling consular cases or is handling visa cases, and I mentioned one of those things in the presentation. So while we are currently looking into using AI to facilitate work that our colleagues are doing worldwide, we would certainly always refrain from using AI to really make or take a decision. So we're basically talking about decision support systems. We're not talking about having an AI a final say in something. So that's very clear. But then obviously you have solutions that are less risky, that could be machine translation, summarization tools, etc., etc. But again, here comes the thing, and that's nothing new. I mean, it's common sense that you need to train people how to do that, how to use these tools. And personally, I consider this is one of the fundamental tasks, because a lot of technological problems you could consider them solved, right? I mean, it's simply a question of piecing things together and making it available. But raising the awareness of colleagues, that's something that we always try to do, organizing data talks, doing small appetizers over lunch, inviting colleagues to simply check in and listen to some explanations. Traveling to colleagues abroad, something we also have been doing quite intensively, especially where we have large embassies, and really getting our colleagues familiarized with these topics. It's a bit of an awareness raising. So data and AI literacy is certainly a fundamental thing. as always, I mean, that's not specific to data and AI, I guess. Raising and keeping the level of expertise in your workforce is probably central to a success or to the success of an organization.
Yes, and I would add, this is also where, like, our system plane that Hans Christian's team is working on, or comes together with the need for localization or for spreading our data infrastructure around the globe, because like let's say data-heavy applications such as this, of course, only work for our diplomats if the latency and the availability is such a way that they can easily access the data, that they can easily pull their reports together. So that makes this kind of approach even more necessary.
Yep. Any further questions? Otherwise, we stand between you and lunch, I guess. Yeah. So watch out if you ask questions, but please no, obviously. If there are questions in the room, please go ahead. We're a small group, so don't be shy. No more questions then. Daniela, maybe a last word?
Yes, thank you everyone for coming and also for asking questions. And yeah, we hope you enjoy those 2 days here at the Tallinn Digital Summit. We certainly are. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.